The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to our Social Media Insights webinar. My name's Alistair Wheat. I'll be your host for this session, and today we're going to look at the evolution of digital PR in retail. It's a very broad subject, so we're going to focus on a couple of key items, but we'll be doing other webinars on the subject in the future, so if there's any areas that we've missed off today that you'd like us to cover, please let us know. You can contact us by these means. So there's my email address there and my Twitter handle, or you can get me on LinkedIn. And as we're going through the webinar, if you want to post questions, you can use the question panel in the webinar panel on the right, or you can just put it to us on Twitter. We'll be looking at that as we go through. We welcome feedback at the end, so you can contact us at events at Vulcana about this or any other of our Vulcana events. So for today, we're going to look at how online and digital is changing retail in general and what opportunities and challenges this means for PRs. We're also going then to look at how PR teams can use social media monitoring to help them inform the messaging for their PR activities. And then finally, we're going to have a little look at how PRs can focus on tracking influencers and then understanding a bit about how influencers relate to each other and what sort of insights we can get as PR people from specifically focusing on influencers that can help us in our PR activities. We're not going to go into huge detail on looking at wider trends, although I'll touch on that in a bit, but I think that's going to be more something for another session. So let's just start off with a little question just to put to people. I'd be interested to know a bit about what your current setup is like. So just going to go through these questions here. I want to know whether or not you actually have any social media listening and analysis at all in your current PR team, or B, whether you do some social media listening. It would be either social media listening is done elsewhere, but then you actually have some evaluation in your PR team, or C, if social media listening is done by you but then you don't do any analysis, and finally option D, that you actually do social media listening and some evaluation yourself. Okay, so I'll wait for a little bit whilst the results come through. Got a clear leader at the moment. Okay. I think we've got a decent sample of the audience, so let's just look at our results. Okay, so in last place we actually have answer B. So social media listing is done elsewhere, but it is included in the PR evaluation. Only 5% said that. The next is that you have some social listening, but don't do any social media analysis or evaluation. And then after that, so that's about a quarter if you said that, and another quarter don't do any social media listening or analysis at all, and a little under half, 45%, do social media listening and also include social media in your PR evaluation program. So it's good to see that option D actually is the top answer. But hopefully as we go through this, if maybe you're in the team and you're not convinced whether you need to do this, hopefully we can add some weight to the argument for why you should be doing both social media listening and analysis and evaluation in the PR function. So let's just start off by having a little bit of time to think about our poor customer here. So here's our confused customer in the middle. They've got lots of messages, lots of things coming their way telling them to buy stuff. They've got word of mouth, so there are friends and family telling them that there are certain products they should or shouldn't buy. If they're active in social media, they'll have people that they follow or friends online recommending products and services to them. They'll be coming across customer reviews, probably more when they may be researching the product. They'll be going to look to see what other people's experiences are of a particular brand or whether a particular product actually lived up to expectations. There's also then the media. So a lot of people are passive or very active consumers of media. They'll be just hearing stuff on the TV, or they'll be going out and reading content, and there'll be often brands will feature in that, and that may well be stuff that you as the PR person has been involved in. And of course there's advertising coming along in all sorts of forms telling them how wonderful certain brands are. So they've got all these mixed messages coming in, and they're struggling to make heads or tails as to which product they should actually go with or which service they should go with. So for PRs, they've really traditionally been looking at media as the domain that we operate in. Advertising isn't really an area that PRs tend to get involved in that much, but what about these other two areas over here? What role can and should PR play when it comes to word of mouth and customer reviews? Increasingly we see search being an important element, and when people search, we know that PR content can impact the results that people get, especially for organic search directly to your own site. But then also customer reviews can be very strong influences in terms of what people decide to buy. And in fact, 90% of customers say that buying decisions are influenced by online reviews, and 88% say that they trust online customer reviews as much as personal recommendations. So clearly very important in shaping people's opinions about which brand they should go with. And here's actually a quote from an article with Mark Lewis, who's the online director of John Lewis. This is just from yesterday, and he says that there are going to be more changes in the next 5 years for retail than the last generation, and that's driven by these things. He says our customers are embracing new technologies, and that in turn is fundamentally changing how they go about their shopping and what they expect of retailers. In this world of instant access, instant price comparison, instant social reviews, at the heart of what we've chosen to stand for is trust. It's the very kernel of the John Lewis brand. And I thought it important to highlight this bit here. So they have chosen to stand for trust. And this is coming from the online director, but you could really say, for PR, that's what PR is about. It's about trust and reputation. And, for John Lewis, a very well-loved and respected retailer, they see that these changes are affecting what they do, and trust is key. So just before we get into any other detail, we can say that PR has still got a massive role to play just in understanding the wider reputation and trust towards a brand across all forms, whether or not PR has had a direct hand in shaping the content that's come out online or not. And just to reiterate the point of this, so this is the John Lewis Retail Report 2014. You can see here how important online is in driving purchasing decisions. So only 14% of sales for John Lewis are actually stuff that is researched online and bought online, but then nearly a quarter is where people are actually researching the product online before then going into the store to buy it. So in total, about half of all of John Lewis's sales have had online play an important role, either in just the research or actually the final point of purchase. So I'm sure this is probably nothing new for the people on this call, but I just want to kind of reiterate that these big changes in how consumers behave need to have an impact on how PRs go about their daily business. And at least in my experience, that isn't always necessarily the case, just because especially social media doesn't necessarily feature strongly enough in the overall daily activity or the reporting that PRs get involved in. So this is a quote from Kevin Ashton. Kevin Ashton's a leading British tech entrepreneur pioneer, and he's actually the guy behind the phrase the Internet of Things. So it's a very popular theme at the moment. And he's just recently published an article with a link there at the bottom, saying that social media for brands really is all about listening. And I don't normally like putting these sort of platitudes in my webinars, but he says social media is not a bullhorn for broadcast, but a coffee shop for conversation. And he actually makes a very good point here, and he argues it really well in his post. And he's basically saying that actually a lot of brands look at social as just another channel, and I definitely see this in PR as well, that a lot of PRs see social media as another means by which they can go about just broadcasting to the world and getting more impressions for their messaging. And what Kevin argues is that actually it's not very effective, and brands don't really get a huge amount of traction in terms of getting extra eyeballs on their brand. And going to show a bit of analysis on this. So none of the Interbrand top 100 are actually in the top 100 on Twitter. It's a bit of a messy chart here, but basically on the left you have the top 10 Interbrand ranks. So Coca-Cola is the #1 brand of the world, and then Apple and IBM, and you got the bottom 10 there as well. And then what we see on the right is where those brands actually show up in the Twitter rankings. So Google is the #1 brand on Twitter. They actually come 110th overall, whereas Coca-Cola, which is the #1 brand of the world, actually doesn't even feature in the top 1,000. So basically, when people are on social media, they're not really going for brands. We can probably guess that it's celebrities, especially pop and music and TV celebrities that are really the ones getting the fans and the following on social media. So Kevin's arguments, and I think I probably agree with them, is that brands shouldn't necessarily be thinking of social media primarily as another channel to broadcast, and PRs shouldn't do that either. The main opportunity for brands when it comes to social media is actually to treat it as a listening exercise. And so for PRs, what that means is that it's an opportunity to actually get some feedback and get an awareness of what people are actually thinking about you as a business, and also for PRs, how they're reacting to what they're reading about you in the mainstream press. So this is then maybe what sort of a model should look like for PRs when it comes to bringing social media into their daily activities. So we talked about the importance of customer reviews and word of mouth. Now, I don't think that PR teams should be the ones going out there trying to respond to every post. You're not the customer services team. You're not the community management team. But good PR teams, modern PR teams now really need to have social media listening as a key part of their daily activity. And so a social media listening team is able to bring in intelligence that comes from understanding how customers are reviewing your products, what they're saying about you, and influencers form an important part of both of these elements. That can then come through and inform how you go about relating with the media, because they're looking at those same sources themselves. And it can also help you tailor and adjust the way in which you talk about your brands, so that you're bringing some of that intelligence that comes from social media listening, and then that feeds through into the media, because that is still going to be the main channel by which you're getting, you're changing people's perceptions of what you do. So I've got 2 sets of recommendations here. So 4 recommendations for how to actually include social in your traditional media analysis, and then I've got 4 recommendations for how to include social, to look at this when it comes to social media analysis as well. So the first thing to say when you're looking at your traditional media analysis is that perhaps as one of the measures that you use, if you're doing this with us, if you have your media analysis with us, then talk to your account manager about it so they can advise on how to do this, or if you're doing it internally or elsewhere, speak with your other providers. But I'd say this is perhaps a measure that I very rarely see actually being used in evaluation, but this is to actually measure what proportion of your mainstream coverage, and again by mainstream I'm talking about national press, regional press, magazines, trade publications, both in print and offline, or maybe also include broadcast if you evaluate that as well. And I'd also recommend that you include key bloggers and people like that in the mix too. So look at how often social media content or conversations is being included in mainstream evaluation. And then specifically to also look at the sentiment of that social content. So you may have a journalist who's written an article about you, but you may see that within the article there's a little snippet of what someone said on Twitter, or a post that they put onto Facebook, or a video that they watched on YouTube. So then look at the sentiment. So are people picking up on negative or positive stuff on social media and then bringing that into the mainstream content that they're writing? Now, I'm not primarily thinking of this sort of content, although it is important. So this is about a year ago. It's actually September last year, in the run-up to Halloween. Tesco and Asda thought it would be good to have some costumes on sale. One of them, the one from Asda, was that mental patient fancy dress costume, and Tesco had the Psych Award adult costume, and this provoked a bit of a reaction on Twitter and elsewhere. People getting very upset about how they were, stigmatizing people with mental illnesses, and so there's a big backlash on that. And you also got these sort of articles and headlines from the Daily Mail, talking about outrage. And so, yes, this sort of thing, it is important, and this will feature in any evaluation that you do where you're including social. But I think these may be sort of blips, the sort of thing that people get really upset about for a while, but then it quickly fades away. I'm really focusing here much more on the sort of more ongoing underlying trends of consistent over time, people complaining or commenting and commending you as a brand. And that's the sort of thing that I think is really important to get visibility of in your mainstream PR, to see because the journalists are looking at this stuff, and it's important to understand how are journalists' perceptions of you being affected by what they read, because journalists are increasingly active on social media, and they're taking what you say about yourselves, but they're also looking at what they see people saying about you in social media. So important to understand that. When you actually have the mainstream content that has got a social media dimension, I think it's important to then try and categorize it based upon these three headings. So incident would be the sort of thing that we just looked at, so sort of the one-off spikes. This is the oh, I wish they hadn't done that category mainly. There may be sometimes when it's a positive thing, but often it will just be maybe something that someone said on one of your own social media channels. Could have been an agency or an intern maybe tweeted something they shouldn't have done, or it could be something that went wrong in a store. A store manager was, belligerent about a particular policy they didn't need to, and it blows up. The media loves to pick up on these things, so you need to understand how much of that is these one-off incidents. But the two more important ones are these review or reaction categories. So this is where journalists actually will they'll see that there's a new product's been launched, and they want to get people's reactions. So they'll go and they'll get quotes from people to see what they think about it. This has been particularly true, for example, for the iPhone 6 release, including the sort of the bending story. But journalists want to look at social media to see how people are reacting to it, and they'll often pick up little nuggets to include in their commentary. And in the reviews, it's maybe a little bit more detailed comments on places like Amazon when they go in and see the overall star ratings to get an idea of how people are thinking about a product. And the final one to look at is when journalists are writing about you and they're talking about social media, what channels are they referencing? So Twitter's kind of the easy one because it's public and it's easy. There are various plugins you can use to get that data. But quite often journalists will look for new and emerging platforms. So Instagram is now quite big and referenced by journalists, and then they'll often bring in Vine and Pinterest, but then there are new channels. So Ello, when's Ello going to start being used as a platform that journalists start referencing? And it's maybe useful for you looking at the mainstream coverage to then see what channels are journalists getting interested in, and that might then inform some of your social media profile. And so then flipping this over, so about half of you, I think, are about 45% said that you have some kind of social media analysis as part of your PR program. So these are some of the things I think that maybe you want to consider when you're looking at your social media analysis. The first thing is to look at the prominence of mainstream stories in social. So a lot of what people say about you in social media will be driven by what people have read about you in the mainstream press or heard about you in broadcast news. And it's good to then see what effect is your PR activity, either proactive or just the reactive stuff, featuring in social, and then to get an idea of also then how people are reacting to that. So you've had positive media coverage, but are people then responding to that in the way that you want them to? So that's then when you start to look at the drivers of negative and positive comment. So there'll be certain things that are within your control and certain things that you've got no control at all. So if you can see that there's a lot of negativity around, I don't know, particular pricing or a particular customer service policy that you've implemented, you may not really be able to comment on that necessarily in your sort of PR program, or it might be the case that actually you as the PR person needs to recognize that that's a reputational risk that's growing, and you need to bring your CEO or some other senior person to come and comment on that. But more importantly, it's maybe just something to be aware of, that your PR messaging may not actually address the concerns that people have got about your business. Or alternatively, there may be really good things about your brand that people have picked up on, and you as the PR person need to actually incorporate that in your messaging because it's something that people like, and maybe you need to include that in your PR messaging. Most of you will have message penetration or message analysis as part of your traditional PR evaluation, and so that will kind of come through a little bit with point one here. So there'll be certain stories that have got strong messages, the sort of messages that you want, and they'll come through in social. But it's also important to look at what I've put here, the organic message penetration. So this is where people are spontaneously coming forward and saying things about your brand that you want them to say. So this is kind of the unprompted thing, and this is, I think this is the really strongest indicator of when your brand is on the right track, when you can actually, and when your PR is having the best effect, is when people are not only hearing the right sorts of messages coming through your mainstream channels, but then they actually start to repeat those messages of their own accord in social when they're talking about you to their friends or just the wider social media community. And finally here, important elements to look at, it's good to look at, I'm kind of skipping over some of the obvious stuff here, like just general share of voice and trends over time. But one thing I don't see enough of is looking at specifically influencer share of voice. So you may have a clear idea of who your influencers are. There may be a piece of work that you're doing. We can help you with that if you do want to talk to us about that. But if you've got an idea of who your influencers are, you want to understand how often are you being mentioned by your key influencers. So you can post, you can then bring up that share of voice within your main evaluation and compare it against your general share of voice. So moving on then to actually talk a little bit more about influencers. We here at Gorkana track influencers across a number of categories. If you've heard me talking in other webinars, you may have heard me talk about this in other categories already. But we actually track over 1,700 fashion and beauty bloggers and vloggers on Twitter. So vloggers is video bloggers, just for anyone who doesn't know. And they're pretty active. So they tweet an average of about 4.6 times a day. Journalists tweet an average about 4 times. So this community is actually a little bit more active on social than your average journalist. And I'm just specifically going to be looking at data that we've captured between July 1st to September the 30th. And I just want to illustrate in the coming slides just a little bit about how taking especially Twitter content for key influencers can really help guide you as a PR team in terms of focusing on key trends, but then also guide you in terms of maybe who you should focus on, because I'm not advocating that, whilst I think that PR needs to have a key role in social, that it should just be about PR. Many of you will have teams in your business that look after customer care or do community management. I'm not suggesting you need to do that, but I do believe PRs really need to focus on influence as a key community, especially when there's a big overlap with other forms of media, like journalists and other maybe subject matter experts, especially TV celebrities. So many of you, if you work in fashion and beauty, will know who this is. So this is Zoe Suggs. She's known as Zoella on YouTube. If you actually type in ZO on Google, she comes up with the top results. So she's very much a sort of pin-up for YouTube. They're doing a lot of stuff with her. She's actually got 6.2 million subscribers on YouTube, and most of her videos will get over 1 million views. So massive audience. And she's only 24, but she really knows what she's doing. She's there's actually we're near Old Street, and there are now adverts in Old Street Tube Station for YouTube promoting her channel. So it's the social world coming into the real world. She's also got 3.2 million Instagram followers, subscribers, and 2.37 million Twitter followers. So she's a big thing in social media. She's absolutely one of the sort of top UK social media celebrities, and now she's appearing on national TV in various places as well. But is she really the right sort of person really for a brand to be getting involved with? And what's the audience that she's got? Who are these 6.2 million people? Well, she, for example, has done stuff with One Direction in the past. She's done a couple of interviews with them, and they have got absolute legions of fans on social media. And so, a lot of them have migrated over to her, and she's got fans from outside of the UK as well. So she's very popular. But is she really the right sort of person for you as a fashion brand if you want to get people coming and actually buying products from you? So what I did was I thought, well, let's actually have a look and see what sort of profile does Zoella have within the actual blogger community. So, like I said, we're tracking 1,700 fashion bloggers on Twitter, and she's actually not even in the top 100 most mentioned Twitter profiles by that community. In fact, we've got nearly 900,000 tweets from the 1,700 authors, and she's only mentioned 849 times. So less than 0.1% of the tweets from the key fashion and beauty influence community on Twitter actually are about her. So broadly speaking, they're actually, even though she's a really big star in terms of followers, the key influencer community is broadly ignoring her. So what does that mean really for brands? Well, you know, does that tell you something about the audience that are following her? Maybe it does. So this is now flipping it around. So if the fashion blogger community are not talking about Zoella, who are they talking about? So these three bloggers here are in fact the three influencers that have been mentioned. So this is not looking at brands or organizational accounts, but these are the three individuals who have been mentioned the most by their own community. And so number 3 is actually the British Beauty, at Brit Beauty Blog there. She's got 37,000 followers on Twitter. Number 2 is this big fashionista there, Kelly. And the number 1, so this is the most mentioned fashion and beauty blogger by the fashion and beauty blogger community in the UK, is actually this Zoe London, so at Zoe London DJ. So you might be able to see from that they're perhaps a slightly different demographic to Zoella and her target audience. But they're the ones being referenced most by the community. So this is, again, just maybe a tool that PRs can use when trying to focus your efforts, is to look at your community of influencers, try and make that as broad as you can, and then look at within that community, who are they talking about, what are the things and the themes that they're excited about. And that might then guide you in terms of your strategy, because I do think PRs need to have a role in talking to these sort of people. And we can also then look at overall sort of analysis of what are they talking about? So of those 1,700 accounts that we're tracking, what's the split of high street fashion to online fashion? So it's actually pretty even. So we've got a number, and this is not exhaustive, but we've got a number of high street fashion brands that we're tracking, and then also a number of online fashion brands. And you can see that the online fashion brands, actually, if I look at the next slide, this is just a sample here, which brands are talking about. ASOS is actually being talked about more than most of the brands. So the fashion and beauty bloggers are really getting excited about ASOS. Now, overall share of voice-wise, especially in mainstream coverage, they're nowhere near as big as some of the high street fashion ones. But when it comes to the trendsetters, the people who are shaping and informing opinions online, they're actually very big. A lot of the times it's actually then waiting for something to arrive in the post, and when it arrives, they go and they tweet about it and they share it. And ASOS also sends some stuff. So useful, I think, from a PR's point of view, to understand the sort of the profile of certain brands within the influencer community. It's also good to look at how often key influencers actually mention any brands. So what we're looking at here is, this is kind of brand-friendly influencers. You may have an idea of some influencers who talk about fashion, talk about beauty, or if that's nothing to do with they were talking about your subject area. But if they never mention brands, sometimes they just out of principle won't talk about brands. You might be wasting your time trying to do any engagement with them. It may be better to actually focus on authors who actually do mention brands. So what we've got here is actually a listing of the number of times different Twitter profiles have actually mentioned the high street fashion brand. So this one, the Fashion Ache, and then followed by Style News UK, and then Ella Lapetite. They're sort of the top 3 in terms of people who've mentioned brands. So, and actually that's actually a variety of brands. So you can see that they don't mind referencing brands, and they may be kind of open to being approached by you as a business. Flipping it around, you may want to sort it by the number of followers. So, so there's Zoe Bow, that's Zoella on Twitter, and she's got the most followers by a big margin, but she's only once actually mentioned a high street fashion brand in this time period. So you may say, right, well, if you want to focus for people who've got a lot of followers, we also then want to look at people who reference brands with reasonable frequency. So you may say, well, actually, these two are, the top of our list. So Tanya Burr and Caesar Bubble, maybe they're better to approach because they've got a large number of followers, but they also mention brands with a reasonable frequency. So there's a couple of just tips there for how to go about targeting and understanding influencers that can get you a better profile within the key target groups. So I just want to then wrap up and give some time for questions. So here are my sort of 3 top tips. So as PRs, social needs to form part of what you do, but don't get into everything. Focus on the key influencers. If you don't know who they are, then make it a priority to try and map those out. Also, to include social as a dimension within your traditional media evaluation. So look at the stuff you're already doing, like message penetration and sentiment, but then also try and look at how much social media content is informing and being added to the mainstream coverage. Is often there just to give a bit of a flavour as to what the man on the street thinks, or the woman on the street. And finally, incorporate analysis of reviews and peer recommendations in your overall media evaluation. So what I'm saying there is that look at the longer-term trends. So if you've got consistent issues that come up in customer reviews about your product or general word-of-mouth recommendations, that needs to be reflected somehow in your PR planning. So there's a little bit of a whistle-stop tour of a number of ideas, but hopefully that has been a bit helpful today. Just want to give some time now for a couple of questions to come through. So feel free just to pick that up on the... some more questions. Just will there be a copy of it? So if you do want a copy of the webinar, just maybe emails at events@vulcano.com and we can get you a copy of it. And we can share that with you afterwards. If you do want to know anything more about some of the data, especially if you do work in fashion and beauty, and you've got more questions about the research that we've got, do let us know. But I'm happy to answer any further questions. Okay, well, actually no questions through. Hopefully that means I've answered the main things people had in mind. But if you do, if you're listening to this on YouTube later and you do have questions, please get in touch. But I hope that's been helpful for you, and have a good rest of the day. Bye-bye.